Hello, friends. If you don't know who I am, my name is Joe, better known as Draconium, and at the time of uploading this, my track First Contact has either hit or surpassed 1,000 plays. This will be my second track to have ever made it this far, and honestly, I cannot thank you enough for the support. Really appreciate it. It's awesome knowing that a lot of people out there actually like my stuff. And in order to celebrate, I decided that I would open up the Ableton Live session and walk through everything I did. So before I get too far into things, I wanted to take a sec and talk about how this track came to be. It originally started as a meme for the Twitch streamer, the 8-Bit Drummer, where I flipped that Don't Touch Me meme. It's up on SoundCloud, by the way, if you want to hear it or something. It's not exactly the greatest, but I still like it. That was all well and good, but I felt that the actual idea that I came up with was just too good to be just a meme. So I went back and basically redid almost everything. Hell, you can even see the meme samples up here because I didn't take them out of the project. I'm a lazy little shit. Anyways, let's get into it. The track, it starts with this vocal trap motif that is basically there throughout the entire thing. And surprise, surprise, it's a cymatic sample. Got a problem with that? You can sue me. I don't care. So in order to fade it in, I'm actually using an audio effects rack called, where is it? It's called Washout, and basically does what it says on the tin. It uses grain delay, filtering, reverb, more delay, and a compressor to wash out the input signal. Really great for transitional stuff. Another thing that's fading in is the main Reese right down here. And it's really simple. It's just a patch, really simple patch inside of kilohertz's phase plant, but you can really do this in any synth that has two oscillators. So I have two analogs, two saw waves. One of them is detuned down by like 10 cents. Then I have an EQ curve here that basically cuts out all of the highs and mids, only leaving behind some of the low mids and some of the lows. And I also slapped an OTC on it because, of course, I fucking did. This is an electronic track. Another thing is I have an exact copy of this Reese, except no ATT for no no OTT for some reason, and it's just playing exactly what this line is playing, but about 19 semitones up or something. And then after that, the sub and the chords come in. With these chords, the chords are right there. With these chords, I used a technique which I believe is used in older drum and bass. That is, you take a sample of a chord and you transpose that around instead of like building individual chords. It's an extremely interesting sound when done right, in my opinion. And here I'm using MIDI, but it doesn't change that much. I am transposing around a D sharp minor 9 chord, uh, I think. Yeah, it sounds like a D sharp minor 9. That's played by a layered stab patch in phase plant, and also this background pad thing up here. Yeah. And then after this section, after this idea repeats, the main bass fades in. And the main bass sound in this entire thing has a lot of layering, which is truly a magical thing in sound design. Because it's very rare that you can have a patch that can do everything that you want, that can do everything you want it to do to get the sound that you need. So just for the transitional element, I have the main body of the bass, but after this section, more layers come in. This So to start out, we have the main patch itself. It's a really cool sound. Yeah. So what I'm doing, if I turn off all the effects, it sounds like this. Kind of lame, not gonna lie. So first thing I did is I added kilohertz disperser. It's a really interesting effect where, correct me if I'm wrong, but it does like a bunch of filtering, basically the equivalent of like getting like stacking a bunch of Ableton's EQ3s to get like this interesting lasery sort of effect. Uh, just adding some subtle stuff in the high end, maybe adding a little bit of click, a little bit of high end clickiness, I think. I then also distort it with Ableton's amp simulator. Very, very small amount. And then sound design technique that I don't really see talked about too much, but really is a magical thing, is using a vocoder, where you actually use the modulator as a carrier. It completely changes the sound. Like it doesn't completely change it, but it does change some things about it, and it's something that I use a lot in this track, all over the place. I even used it in the vocals up here. See, vocoder. So yeah. Then after that, I used Virtual Riot's Fat Rack. Basically, what this is doing is it has a bunch of saturation effects and other stuff in it that basically adds a little bit of saturation for each plugin, and in the end, you get something fat. And then just an OTT, because again, this is an electronic track. What are you expecting? Sausage fattener, a favorite of mine when it comes to bass processing. An EQ to cut out the low end to make space for the sub. Make sure you do this, and cutting out some of the more muddier stuff. Another sausage fattener. And one more EQ, cutting out a weird frequency. And there you go. There's the main body of the sound. There's still quite a bit more going on here, and in fact, another main body layer is introduced right here with similar processing. Together, that sounds like, yeah. Another thing that's in here is a friend of mine, Kevin Sutton. He played in a bass guitar line of him trying to follow the main bass for me to layer it. And what I did is I took the part of that I liked, chopped it up, and basically distorted the heck out of it to get another nice bass layer. Haha, bass layer. Speaking of bass layer, there's another one, adding a bit more attack to the sound with that pitch envelope. Nothing too crazy going on here. EQ to cut out the lows. Ableton's erosion, which is adding some of that high-end noise. A fat rack, of course. Another EQ to bring out the highs a bit more. Two more OTTs. Pitch shifter, which looks like is never used. And one more EQ. On top of that, there's also this layer. It's just like a simple noise thing with a crap ton of processing on it, which just gives the sound a little bit more attack. And then also in this specific section, there's, which looks like, what is this? Saw FM'd by a square and then run through a saturator and disperser with an EQ, OTT, distortion, fat rack, another EQ, erosion, another OTT, sausage fattener, auto pan for that wobble, some auto pan for the wobble, and one more EQ. And then this, I named this after the fact as I was going through the project. This is one of the craziest sounds in the entire track. It's not a significant thing, but I think it's worth pointing out. The faceplant patch on its own is objectively terrible. So if I remove all the effects, the basic stuff is there. Like, it's a saw FN'd by a triangle, saturator, disperser, and phase distortion. And you get that, which is interesting, but not exactly, worthy of, yo, this is fire or some shit like that. So, of course, we start out with the normal cutting out the lows, a distortion with an amp, fat rack, another EQ, boosting the highs, cutting the mids a little bit, an erosion to add a little more high-end crunch, another OTT, or actually no, just a OTT, an OTT, an OTT, sausage fattener, an auto pan, which doesn't look like it's used. Interesting. Another EQ. Get rid of some of that mud. And then this is where the sound is truly transformed. A vocoder. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, what the hell? And then one more EQ, getting rid of some of that harsh high-end stuff, boosting some of the mids. And yeah, you get a fart bass. On top of this, on top of the transition into this section, I'll also fade in like the main breakbeat loop that's used throughout the track. And it comprises of 3 layers. 2 breakbeat loops that I just pulled off a splice. Actually, no, how about I... And then I took the beatboxing from the "Don't Touch Me" meme, and I chopped it up into this. It's just a subtle background thing. Don't really notice it, but it adds a little more texture. Let's see, build up, pretty standard. Risers, noise, stuff like that. Oh, this cool riser that I made with the "Hey" and the "Don't Touch Me." It's really simple. Just is that okay? That's just a normal thing. The main effect that's creating that riser thing is a frequency shifter. And then a filter that's just filtering it in. There's also an EQ cutting out all the low end stuff, and a high pass filter as well. So that's pretty cool. Stadium Cloud Loop to give a little more energy. And oh yeah, 100 points if you can guess where that's from. Now let's talk about the exciting part, the drop. The trick when you're doing these sorts of intense and huge drops is not necessarily the main elements, although those are important. You really want to get those right. But what really is magical is everything going on in the background. Like as I mentioned, even in the build-up, there's a lot of stuff going around to bring up the hype. I also think there's some background stuff going on in the build-up here. Yeah, just a standard riser, so nothing too special. One thing I really want to point out, like, oh yeah, also lots of background stuff there. But one thing I do want to point out is this right here. One thing you can do to fill up the void that is your mix is add something like just a crowd cheering in the background. It doesn't even need to be that prominent, but its presence will fill up the frequency spectrum and make it feel like there's a little bit more going on than there actually is. But yeah, let's take a second to talk about the drums. The drums are really interesting in their own part. It's pretty standard with a snare anchoring the beat on 2 and 4. I think that's... Yeah, that's 2 and 4. I almost forgot. And it's fairly simple, you know, with a, as I said, snare on the 2 and 4. Pretty simple kick pattern as well. Normal cymbal pattern with shaper box, cable guy shaper box on side chaining duty. One interesting thing though is I took the transient of the snare and I made it like this. I made it like this interesting like background thing, and it does a lot to add to the rhythm, I think. Breakdown is pretty standard, kind of serving as a transition between the 2 drop ideas. In the original, however, there was this Wario laughing thing, which I thought was funny. Also, it's the 8-bit drummer, so what do you expect? Skipping ahead a bit, we get to the second drop, which originally was this first part right here. I wanted to add a little bit more, so I decided to elaborate on it and create this callback to the chord progression with this cool arcadish lead right here. But my favorite part about the entire thing, I think, is this bass. And the way this came together is actually pretty cool. I scrubbed through How to Train Your Dragon, found a toothless noise, I put it into Serum, and I made this patch using AU5's hypergrowl method. And then I just did a fuck ton of processing. So I'm going to turn all of that off, and we're going to go through each effect one at a time. So this is what the original sounds like. Yeah, it's you can kind of hear it. It's there, but it's not exactly the um it's not exactly the sexy intense thing that I was going for. Case in point, it doesn't represent Dragonkind properly, so we're gonna fix that. First up, to beef it up, I put on an OTT. Then I added a vocoder. Cleans it up a little bit. Then I added a phaser. Kilohertz disperser. Just added a little bit of a laser detail. I'll talk about this delay in a moment. And I added a fat rack. I think this is one of the more magical effects in this chain. I put on a corpus, which basically what it allows you to do is it allows you to emulate playing the input signal and having like the sound source be like a weird object, like a steel beam, or in this case, a pipe resonator. And it does that. Then I just added a sausage fattener to beep it up. Ooh, that's loud. An EQ to cut out some of the muddier stuff. Ooh. That was a weird laser noise. A frequency shifter, which I use later. I'll talk about that in a moment. Another OTT. Then I use a gate to cut out that tail that you heard, because it was messing up the mix a little bit. A Valhalla room. This is actually something that I forgot to mention while talking about the main bass. One thing that I used throughout the drop and throughout this track is using a reverb with a really long decay of about 6 seconds here, and automating the mix so it comes in right before a note to give it a little bit more push and pull. I'm using that here. Just a little bit of a detail. A washout rack, which I use later, and I'll talk about in a moment. A filter that I use in this buildup. And then the last two effects really finalize the sound and get it to where I wanted. Two EQs, one is cutting out around the, what is that? 50 hertz range, and boosting some of the mids, cutting out some of the mid highs, because there's some nasty stuff. And then you'll notice that frequency spike right there. Wasn't a huge fan of that, so I cut that out. And there you go, the final sound. I'll also note that I layered this with more of Kevin Sutton's bass. This is a bit more subtle. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. You'll notice that if you listen to the track, you'll say, but wait, there's a completely different sound. What is that? Well, it's exactly the same bass. The only difference is that there's one new effect, and that's this delay. And you're probably wondering, how the fuck does a delay turn this into that? And the short answer is with a really, really short decay time of about 25 milliseconds by the looks of it. Well, actually, no, it starts out at 8 milliseconds, and I automate the delay time throughout the line to give it a little bit more movement. And basically, this is kind of like a static chorus effect. where let's say what's the best way I can explain this? So let's say you're outside walking around in town and an airplane flies overhead. If you bring your ear a little closer to the ground, you'll hear the original airplane sound, and then you'll hear the airplane sound coming to you a little delayed. That's bouncing off the ground. That's basically what's being done here. Is I'm modulating the delay time, and I also have it on fade, so I don't get those weird repitching artifact. So I don't get that weird repitching stuff. And then in the last part of the drop, we have the lead coming in. We have some chords playing in the background. You know. And then to wrap things up, is I took this rhythmic bass thing and I tweaked the patch a little bit and I added a filter to ring out to the outro, and then I just have some chords and stuff and the vocal chop that fades out with a washout. In order to transition from this part of the drop to this part, what I did with this section is I took that frequency shifter and this washout and I automated them, and I automated the shift and I automated the washout to actually make a cool transitional effect that sounds like this. And it works perfectly here. What I really think brought it together in the end is a good friend of mine, the letter I. He was kind enough to mix this up for me, do the final mix down and mastering, and he also helped me with the release this time around. So big thanks to him. SoundCloud link is in the description. He recently put out a new album, and it's top notch. So yeah. I think that's everything. Thank you so much for tuning in and allowing me to share this project with you. It was truly a joy to work on, and I can't wait to show you what else I have in the works, but that will have to wait. Until then, bye for now, and remember, I don't give a shit what you say. You are a truly wonderful person and deserve every achievement that you've earned.